Hello book lovers, and welcome back or welcome to Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. Today you're gonna get a little bit of a 2-for-1 deal because I am combining my January TBR with my annual series stats. So usually when it comes to TBRs, I play my TBR game, Lezerin Egedishnish. Don't worry, she is coming back in February. However, in January is going to be the longest and biggest round of squash that series. This is hosted by Bailey from Is Bailey Reading and Kayla from Kayla Ray Reads. I will link Bailey's announcement video down below. If you would like to take part, you can go ahead and sign up and join the Discord. This is actually going to go, I think, a little bit into February, but the way that this readathon works is obviously you're trying to make progress in all the series that you are working on, hence why it works perfectly with me going through my series stats for the year. This round of the readathon is going to be a tournament style readathon, and there will be different competitions, I think, each week, and those are going to be based off of past rounds of this readathon. So I don't really have a set TBR. What I'm going to be doing in this video is I'm going to be going through some really general stats about my series. I'm going to go through the series that I DNF'd, the ones that I completed, and then we will go ahead and see which ones I have left, which ones I'm caught up on, and which ones I need to make progress in. So pretty much you can take the books that I need to make progress in as my January TBR. I do have some of the books here and I will kind of hold them up as I talk about them, and at the end I have a big board of all the potential reads that I could be getting to, just so you can see them all in one place. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully it's not too messy or anything like that, but I'm sure that once we get into it, it will all become clear. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at my spreadsheet. So here I just made a little note about my general stats. This is nothing fancy. There's no graphs or anything like that. I may do some graphs when I do my overall stats for the year, but for this, I just wanted to lay some numbers out. So one number is the starting point, and this is the amount of series that I was working on going into 2023. So I was working on 26 series at the start of the year. And then we have our DNFs, which luckily is only 5. I will say when it comes to DNFing, I don't add a book to this spreadsheet unless I plan to continue it. So if I read the first book of a series and go, nah, it never goes onto the spreadsheet, and so technically it doesn't count towards the DNF category. However, if I put a book on there and then maybe a year or two goes by and I haven't continued with it and I lose interest, or if the series unfortunately starts to go downhill, that is when I will go ahead and DNF it. Then we have completed. I completed 15 series this year. Is that a good number? Is that a bad number? I don't know. I'm not overly upset about it. Do I wish I'd finished more? Yes. I will say that towards the end of the year, I didn't work so much on series anymore because I was preparing for this big round of Squash That series and I really wanted to hold books for that. But I did go ahead and break this down. So right now I have 3 categories. I have series that I started before 2022. Pretty much, I didn't start tracking my series until 2022. So most of these I probably started in 2021, but I did complete another 3 of the series that I had remaining from that time. Then I finished 7 series that I had started in 2022. And then I finished 5 series that I started this year. So started and finished 5 series, that's maybe not as good as I would like. I definitely think that there is a lot of series that I'm not consistent with, especially when it comes to like romance series where they're just companion novels, and so there's not a lot of drive to quickly pick up the next one. Those definitely sit on my spreadsheet for quite a while. That being said, I did start 31 series this year. That is a lot of series for sure. And considering I only finished 5 of them, not amazing, could be better. And that does mean that I'm ending this year with a solid 37 series. So that is kind of high. I don't really have a number that I want to stay below or anything. It's not something I ever thought about. I don't want to like force myself not to pick up a series that I want to start just because I'm like, oh, I want to keep these numbers low. But at the same time, seeing this number, I'm like, okay, it's like creeping up each year, and that's not really a pattern that I want to keep. So it would be great if I could get that, you know, below 30 by the end of the year, but we'll see. We'll try. We're gonna try, and hopefully this round of Squash That series will help, and any other, you know, readathons that happen throughout the year, I will just keep it at the front of my mind, and we'll see how it goes. So those are just the general stats. If we kind of pop over here, this is where you can see all of my currently reading series, and I have a little bit of a color key. So here you see once again, this first section here are series that I started before 2022. Then the light blue are series that I started in 2022. And then if we go down, the red ones are the ones that I started in 2023. And yeah, there's a lot of them. We did start a lot of series, and a few of them are rather long. Of course, if you start a bunch of duologies, it's a lot different than if you start a bunch of series that have 5 or more books in them. But we're just gonna go ahead and we're gonna start with the DNFs and the completed. Then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna remove them from the spreadsheet, and we'll kind of see what it's looking like going into 2024. So starting with the DNFs, I only had 5 of them. The first one is Monstrous, and this is a comic series, and I actually was gifted the 7th book last year. It's under my bed right now because I'm unhauling it. But the thing was, I thought that was the last book in the series, and as I finished that, I very much realized that it was not the last book. And I just kind of felt like I didn't want to wait for the next one to come out, and I was losing a bit of steam with the series anyway. I have to admit, I don't have too much patience with comics or graphic novels that just seem to go on forever and ever and ever. I'm someone who kind of prefers to pick up series where I know where and when it's gonna end, and that is not the case with this series. So I have decided to DNF it. I thought it was a decent time, but I'm more than happy to say farewell to it. Then jumping into 2022 reads, it looks like I am only DNFing one series, and that is Him. I may not know the authors for all of these, I'm sorry, but this is a hockey romance, a male hockey romance that I had a decent time with, and I think the second one is called Us, and it's just been so long since I read the series or this first book, and Us does follow the same couple, so I was kind of like, oh, I think I would have to reread the first book in order to really appreciate the second book, and I don't remember being so wild about the first book, so I didn't want to reread it. So I'm more than happy to just complete the series with the first book. I mean, it could be a standalone. The second book is probably just extra content and whatnot. So I did officially decide to DNF that duology. And then we had 3 here in 2023. I was just making sure there wasn't any extra. First, we had Unwind, and I believe this is by Neil Schusterman, and I really enjoyed this book, like, quite a bit. It was really well written. There was one part in this book that really had me at the edge of my seat, and I fully plan to continue the series until I realize that my library doesn't have the rest of the series as audiobooks, and I just had to be honest with myself. I was never going to pick up these books physically, and so I decided to go ahead and DNF the series. I'm more than happy leaving it as is, and I do still highly recommend that you check it out because it was really well written. It's just a matter of me knowing that I enjoyed it in one format and don't want to transition to reading it in another format, and that is actually the case in this next series as well, Silver in the Wood. So these are novellas. They're super short, and I did have a decent time with the first book. I want to say Emily Tesh is the author, and once again, I actually read the first book physically, and when I went to pick up some of my series continuations for Squash That Series from the library, I found that they actually don't have the physical books anymore. They just have the audiobook with the two books combined, and I was just like, I don't feel like messing with that. I decided I was totally fine with leaving Silver in the Woods as a standalone and just decided to DNF the series. Nothing against the series, it just once again was one of those format changes that I was not wanting to deal with. It may seem like a weird thing, but it's just the way that my brain works. And then for the final series, we had Wicked Fox by Catcho. Is that the author's name? And I kind of struggled with the first book, but the way it ended had me relatively excited for the second book. It took me so long to get attached to her characters that when I started the second book and realized that we were following from the point of view of other characters that I once again was struggling to connect with, I was like, no thank you, I don't feel like going through this again. So I decided to go ahead and DNF the second book and therefore DNF this series. I do know this is a relatively well-beloved duology, and I did read another book by this author this year that was like a contemporary kind of K-pop style YA story, and I really enjoyed that. So she's definitely an author I will try again. It's just these characters weren't working for me. I really hope I don't sound too stuffy because I have been a little sneezy and my throat has been like a little bit tender lately, so I apologize if every once in a while I sound a little nasally. It's because my nose is like stuffing up as I'm talking and breathing through my mouth and all that fun stuff that's happening right now. But let's go ahead and go through the series that I completed. Those are the ones that are going to be in the neon green color. And the first two I'm very proud of because these are duologies that I've been reading since a couple years. Like, how does it take more than 2 years to read a duology? I don't know. The first one is going to be Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. I believe the second book came out in 2022, or did it come out in 2021? I don't even remember. I know that it came out, I bought it, and then it took me like a year to get around to reading it, but I am very happy that I went ahead and completed that duology. Then we have How to Be a Normal Person. This is by TJ Klune, and I finished its companion novel, How to Be a Movie Star. This was a fun series, I think, especially if you're looking for like asexual or demisexual representation. This is a good place to find that because the first one has an asexual character and I believe the second one has a demisexual character. So they just take place in a small town. It's got TJ Klune's humor, and it was a fun time, and it just took me a while to get to the second book. That's all. This one's gonna be a little controversial because Tales of Verenia, I finished this core series a while ago. The problem was that I didn't finish The Damning Stone. This is also by TJ Klune. I don't know if I mentioned that. And the reason I did not finish this book is because it is deeply entwined with the trauma of hearing about Roe versus Wade being overturned. So I decided to mark this series as completed, but as you may see, I marked this last book as purple for a DNF. I would love if one day I could pick up this book and read it, preferably if America got its shit together and made abortion legal again in every state. But for now, I will have to go ahead and just put it aside because every time I think about reading it, I get like anxiety, really bad anxiety. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to put myself in an unhealthy situation or anything. So I have officially decided to mark this as completed because I did complete the core series, but I did not read The Damning Stone, which is like following a different character than you do in the core series. So a bummer, but that's the way that it's going. I just don't want it on my spreadsheet anymore where I'm sitting there feeling guilty that I just can't bring myself to read this book. So yeah, that's just how it is. Now moving on to series that I completed that were started in 2022. The first is Undue Arrogance. I believe the third book in the series was actually the first book I read this year. And this is by Cole McCade. I have started another one of his series. I really love his writing. This is just a trilogy of male romances. All of them have slightly different styles of BDSM in them. He's a great writer. I really enjoyed the romances, the different types of BDSM that were present in them. And I definitely think that his books should be more hyped. So would love if you check that out. Then we have the Tempting Monsters series. This is like a Lady of Rooksgrave Manor. I can't remember the name of the other series. I know there's a novella called like The Basilisk of Star Manor. Anyway, these are these reverse harem monster romances, and I went ahead and read I think both the novella as well as the last book in this series this year. I will say the last book was unfortunately a bit disappointing compared to all the other books, but the first three I had a really great time with. Then we have Heart of Fae, and I believe this book technically has more books in the series, but the first two books follow a couple, and then the other ones seem to be more like companion novels that are set in the same world. I did not love the first book, and then the second book was definitely better, but I just had no interest in continuing in this world. So since I went ahead and completed that couple story, I marked it as a series completed rather than a DNF. Next, we have Arsenic and Adobo. Is this series actually completed? I don't know. I don't know. I guess I will add it back if it's not, or maybe I will just say, you know what, I'm done with this series. I feel like it ended. We're over it. It was fun. It wasn't like so amazing that I'm like hoping there's a next one. I'm kind of hoping that maybe she moves on to other things and other characters, but this is kind of, I believe, what would be considered a cozy mystery series. Next we have Radiance. This is by Grace Dravin. This is a fantasy romance, a very well-known one and a well-beloved one, and I believe I read the third one this year. And this one was slightly different than the first two in that we followed the cousin of the male love interest in the first two books, and I didn't like that couple as much as the original couple, but I went ahead and completed the series. I do believe that on Goodreads it kind of implies that there's going to be a continuation of the series, and I would definitely say that the story is not wrapped up, but I think that the last book in the series came out years ago, and I just don't think that the author is going to come out with anything else because there's no cover on there, there's no release date, so I'm calling it quits, and we're saying that this series is completed. Next we have the Stalking Jack the Ripper series. This is by Carrie Maniscalco, and I went ahead and I think, did I read the last three or the last two this year? I can't remember, but I went ahead and completed this series. I really enjoyed the couple in this. I will say that the mystery aspect of the story is a lot stronger in the first two books, and I think in the second two books that the author focuses a lot more on the romances, and so the mysteries felt a little flat, which was unfortunate because I did enjoy the balance of mystery and romance, but all the same had a great time with that and am looking forward to hopefully getting into her, what is it called, Wicked Kingdoms or Kingdom of the Wicked series this year. Up next we have Binti. I want to say Nnedi Okorafor. Was that the author, or am I thinking of someone else? Either way, I went ahead and finished the last 2 books in this series during one of the Squash That Series rounds. These novellas, I believe all 3 of them would probably be considered novellas, are perfect for a readathon. I listened to them as audiobooks. They're sci-fi. I thought they were really interesting, like not mind-blowing or anything, but they definitely kept me entertained. So she's an author, or they're an author I would definitely want to check out again. All right, now we're moving into the 5 that I started and finished this year. First, we have The Psalm of the Wild Build by Becky Chambers. This was the year I discovered Becky Chambers. I'm still in the middle of her, I think it's called Wayfarer series, but this one I read and completed because they're super short, and it's just a duology as far as I know, and I really enjoyed this series. It's a rather peaceful series. I think most people enjoy it. So if you've been on the fence if you want to check it out or not, I definitely suggest it. It's not like it'll take up too much of your time if you don't like it. Next, we have another duology, and that is The Witch King. That's by H.E. Edgman, I believe, who's an queer indigenous author, so definitely worth checking out. I unfortunately didn't love this series. I definitely think the second book was a lot stronger than the first, but I think I just struggled a little bit with the main character. This author does have another book that is either coming out or already came out. I feel like it already came out, and I will definitely be checking that out. So that was just a YA fae series with a trans main protagonist, so it was pretty fun. This one, you're probably like, you're missing some X's here. No, so the Tarot Sequence, the first trilogy, is completed. I reread the first 2 books and then read The Hourglass Throne. This is by Katie Edwards. I believe it's going to be a total of 9 books, but it's going to be broken up into trilogies. So this is being marked as completed. I'm going to take it off the list. I have no idea when the next book is coming out. When there's a release date, I will go ahead and add it back, and we will be very excited, because I think I gave all these books 5 stars, or at the very, I think I might have given them all 5 stars. So absolutely love this series. I definitely think that you should check it out. All right, and then as far as the final 2, we have Part of Your World. This was by Abby Jimenez, and I read Part of Your World as well as Yours Truly. Obviously, if there's ever any other books that come out in a series, I will add it back to my spreadsheet. I kind of base things off of what's showing in Goodreads. I don't do too much research. Ain't nobody got time for that, at least not me. So for now, I'm calling it completed because I don't know of any others. If there are, I will definitely read them because I had a wonderful time with this. I think a Part of Your World was a 5-star read. I know it was a 5-star read, actually. And I believe Part of Your World was a 4.5-star read. So I had a wonderful time with both of those. And the final series that I started and completed is All for the Game. This is by Nora Savovic. And this was a reread for me, and I love this series. I love this series so much. I have a feeling I will reread this series so often, probably about every other year. I'm not someone who likes to reread books every year because I get tired of things quickly if I read them too consistently or watch them too consistently, things like that. But I definitely will be returning to this series and these characters over and over again. The first book is called The Foxhole Court, and it's mayhem. It's chaos. You read it and you're like, what? But you're having a great time, and that's on that. So I will go ahead now and clear all this out, and then we will go ahead and go through my series that I still need to make progress in. All right, so here we are, and I've gone ahead and deleted, whoops, almost almost all. Now we've deleted all of the completed and DNF'd series. Wow, I started way too many series this year, but that's okay. We will persevere. So we're just gonna go starting from the top. I will let you know which ones I'm caught up on and which ones I need to make progress in. There are a few that I could make progress in that I know I'm probably not gonna get to in January. I will let you know. But if I have the book physically, I will go ahead and hold it up so that you can see which books I am potentially getting to. Obviously, I have a bunch of audiobooks as well, and like I said, at the end I will show you a big screen with all of the books on them that I could get at, so you can pause that and take a look to see what you can expect me to read in January. So starting here with Heartstopper. So as we all know, book 5 came out. I am including the short, like, it was a novella, like a written novella. It wasn't a comic in here, so that's why there's an extra space here. I have not read the new one yet. I think it just recently came out, and I do want to reread the series before I read that, because I honestly have forgotten a lot of what happened in that series outside of what happened in the TV show, and that probably won't happen until, you know, around mid-year. So I know I'm not going to be working on this in January or anything, but I am very excited to reread this series, and I've heard only good things about the new one so far, so I'm very, very excited. And then we have Boyfriend Material. I believe this is by Alexis Hall. I want to say that the next one is not coming out till like the end of 2024, so obviously I'm not going to be working on that in January, and I'm also not super optimistic about getting to it this year at all, because I think it came out in like October, and it's called Father Material, and it's just not giving fall winter vibes, so I'll probably read it like spring or summer of 2025. Then we have Dark Rise. This is by C.S. Pacat. You can see the first book there. I do own the second book, but I need to reread the first book before I get into that second book. And I don't foresee myself doing that in January, to be honest, just because that is a first book in a series. You can technically read first books in series during this readathon, but I'm definitely going to be focusing more on continuing series. But this is a great series. It is a YA story, but C.S. Pacat is really great at world building, so that's why I need to reread it, because I need to explore all those little details. Then we have the Ravenwood series by Talia Hibbert. So I read the second book in this companion series a while ago, and I didn't really plan on continuing it because I think it was maybe like a 3.5 star read. I was kind of underwhelmed after reading her Brown Sisters series as well as The Princess Trap, and so I initially wasn't going to continue with it, but the series kind of stuck with me, the little snippets I got of the other characters that would be present in this series, so I was like, you know what, I will go ahead and read it. And I actually added it back to my spreadsheet like a couple weeks ago and got the first book, A Girl Like Her, from the library. Now, while this is a first book in a series, and I said I'm not going to do that for this readathon, this is technically the second book in the series for me, since I already read book 2 and I don't plan on rereading that. So this is just the next book in the series that I'm getting to, and since it is a library book, I will probably be prioritizing it. So I'd say it's a very high chance that I will be getting to this. I do have, I think, like 3 or 4 of Talia Hibbert's backlogs that I would really like to get to in the year of 2024, starting with this one. It is just a contemporary romance. I'm not really going to be going into the synopsis of a lot of these books. Obviously, when I do my wrap-ups for them in my mid-month and end-of-month wrap-up, I will talk more about them then. All right, so that is all for my pre-2022. So I am only actually going to be working on one of these during the month of January, but The others, I just need to do some rereading or I'm caught up on them. Moving into 2022, we are starting with The Lord of Eternal Night, which is by Ben Alderson. I have read the first 2 books in this series and do own book 3, which is Alpha of Mortal Flesh. This is a bit of a chonker. I believe it is over 500 pages, just barely. So is it the best book to be reading during a readathon? I don't know, but it is a male romance, so it should be a bit of a quicker read. I really did enjoy the first book in the series, which was The Lord of Eternal Night, but I didn't love the second book as much, which I think was called, I have it over here, King of Immortal Tithe, but that was a more fae-based story with like Hades Persephone vibes, which is 2 things that I haven't had the best of luck with. This is going back to paranormal with werewolves and witches, so hopefully I enjoy this as much as the first one. I can't remember if the 4th book in this series has come out. I know that the author has been posting about it a lot, and I believe that is more of an Ariel kind of retelling with a mermaid and a kind of Ursula-esque character. So I'm super excited for the 4th one. So hopefully I really enjoy this one so that my hype for that book doesn't decrease. Next, we have what I'm calling the Love Hypothesis series. I don't know if they're all called STEM romances. This is kind of difficult for me. Like, should I continue to count these as a series? I will say that the YA book that she just released and the paranormal book that she is releasing at the beginning of next year are not related to this series. But if she keeps writing STEM books, am I all gonna say that they're in a series and then the series never ends? I don't know. But for now, the books that I have listed here are The Love Hypothesis, Love on the Brain, and the first 2 novellas. And the next book I would get to during the readathon is the last and final of the novellas in this Loath to Love You kind of grouping of short stories. The one I'm working on would be Below Zero. I haven't been loving the novellas as much as the full-length novels, but I'm just not a novella girly, so it is what it is. I do usually like Ali Hazelwood. I do own A Love Theoretically, but I also acknowledge that her books are all really similar. So I usually want to put at least 3 or 4 months in between reading her books. So I'm definitely going to be falling behind considering she's coming out with so many books and I am not binge reading them. The next series is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I am caught up on that series. I read Hellbent this year and really loved it. I felt like Ninth House was meh, but Hellbent was excellent and I'm super excited for the 3rd book. I think some people were saying it was supposed to just be a duology and they're upset that it turned into a trilogy. And I do have to admit, I don't like when authors decide to just like continue a series beyond the original expected ending. But I am having fun with these characters and in this world. So obviously when it comes out, whenever that is, I will be reading it. Next, we have Heaven's Official Blessing, and I am planning on reading book 7 and 8 and completing the series in January. Now, I don't own either of these books yet because they are on my birthday/Christmas list, and I know that my parents already bought some stuff off of there, so I don't really want to go in there and purchase something they may have already bought. We are not celebrating Christmas this year because my sister and mom are out of the country until the 30th, so hopefully we celebrate sometime early January and then I either get the book gifted to me, or if I see I don't, I can go ahead and purchase them and read them in the second half of January. But I have been absolutely loving this series so much. It's translated from Mandarin and it is like a queer historical fantasy story, and I would say paranormal as well. Really a lot of genres going into that. Next, we have Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer, and I did finally get around to continuing the series this year. And unfortunately, I didn't love the second book that much, but I felt very much like it was a bridge book. So I am very excited to complete this series with Acceptance. I did notice there was kind of this fourth book lurking around on Goodreads, but I think this book came out in like 2014 or something crazy like that. That fourth book has no release date, no cover or anything, so we're gonna say once we read this book that the series is completed. Up next is Iron Widow, and this was one of my favorite books of the year in 2022, and unfortunately the second book was pushed back to be released in I think April of 2024, so obviously I won't be working on that. I do want to reread the first book before I get into book 2, so I will probably reread that in like March or April in preparation for that next book. Then we have the Inheritance trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. I do own the bind up of this trilogy as well as an additional novella. I finally read the second book of this series. 5 stars, absolutely loved it. Now the last book is a bit longer. Now obviously this also includes a novella in it, but I want to say that this book is at the very least over 400 pages, so it is one of those series where I'm a little intimidated to read it during a readathon where I'm trying to like read as much as possible. But seeing as how much I loved the second book, I really don't want to put off reading the last and final book for too long. This is N.K. Jemisin's debut trilogy, and I just have to say she is such a talented writer. It's just the way that she builds worlds is really comprehensive to me, because I feel like they are rather complex, but at the same time I never feel like I'm lost or anything. So I definitely think that she's a fantasy author that you should check out. You may be a little intimidated because I think when they talk about her Broken Earth trilogy, they talk about it being very confusing. I've not read that one, but I will say that this Inheritance trilogy, at least for me, is relatively easy to read and very, very enjoyable. Next we have Winter's Orbit, and the next book is called Ocean's Echo, and I think it's more a companion novel. They're in no way like related. I feel like I need to reread Winter's Orbit, which is right here, by Everina Maxwell, before I go into Ocean's Echo, because I feel like for some reason when I think about this book, I keep telling myself that I rated it too high, that I let the fact that everyone loved it and was hyping it up get to me, and I just want to reread it so that I feel more secure in my rating of this author before I jump into another one of their books. It's a weird experience. It's something that's happened to me before with Red, White, and Royal Blue, and when I reread it, I gave it a 5 stars again. So every once in a while, I think my brain just gets a little bit confused about whether it correctly rated a book. So I would love to reread Winter's Orbit. I'm not going to be doing that in January, but that also means that I won't be continuing this series in January. The next series is The Bargainer by Laura Thalassis. The first one is called Rhapsodic, and I believe the third one is called Dark Harmony. And I do own this on my Kindle, and I will definitely be reading this in January. I really wanted to finish it this year, but sometimes you get extra points for completing a series during this readathon, so I actually pushed off doing so. So I will be reading this in the month of January and finishing off this series. I will say I really enjoyed the first 2. The novella was terrible, and I do not like the love interest of the story, but I really love, what is her name, Calypso, I think, our female main character, and I am looking forward to finishing out this series because there are other books by this author that I am hoping to check out. Last, we have Cemetery Boys. This is another series I recently added back because I shouldn't say added back, it was never on here because I thought it was a standalone, but there is in fact another book in this series coming out, I think in 2024 if we're lucky. Obviously I will not be continuing this series because the next book isn't out yet, but I absolutely love this book. I think about it so often. I feel like I really need to read it. I think I read it as an audiobook the first time around, and it would be really great to physically read it because I do now own it. I was lucky enough to find a version of it at Half Price Books. Okay, so now we're moving into our 2023 series. starting with Little Thieves. This is one of those series where I mentioned I don't like when the author decides to continue the series after only planning a certain number of books, because I'm 100% sure that that is what happened with this series. I really loved the first book. I believe this is by Margaret Owen. I was really surprised. For some reason, I expected not to like it, and I loved it. I read the second book and enjoyed, I would say, 90% of it until we got to the end, and I started to realize that the author was going to try and get another book out of the series. And the way that she did that was kind of by undoing everything that was done in book 2, therefore making book 2 almost irrelevant. And I hated that she did that so much. I think I still rated book 2 a 4.5 stars just because I love the characters and the concept of the story, but that ending pissed me off so much. I was like, why would you do that? But there's gonna be a third book and I'm gonna read. Next we have Women of Troy, which I think is by Pat Barker, and that next book isn't coming out until mid or late 2024. So obviously I'm not going to be working on that. I'm all caught up. I read the second book this year. I do enjoy this series. I really like her writing. I have to admit, Greek mythology, while it sometimes calls me, isn't like my Roman Empire or anything like that, but I still have a good time with the series just because I really enjoy her writing. Next we have the Necessary Evil series, which is by Only James, and I have not purchased the third book in this series yet. They were originally on KU. Unfortunately, it seems they're not there anymore. It is what it is. I think Moonstruck is the name of the third book that I'm getting to. These are all male-male romances where one of the love interests is a psychopath or a sociopath. I have a good time with them. I just need to go ahead and purchase it. This is just once again one of those books, and that is on my wish list. I'm just waiting to make sure no one has purchased it for me before I purchase it for myself. Up next we have The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. This book has been, or this series has been, a bit of a roller coaster for me because I really enjoyed the first book. I didn't enjoy the 0.5 novella. I did not enjoy books 2 or 3, but I did enjoy the 3.5 novella. And the last book I need to get to is The Mask Falling. Once again, this is a chunkier book, but I would really love to get to it in January because I would like to unhaul some books in February, and I would like to unhaul this series because she is rewriting them. So even if I like this book, I will be completing this series and then adding it back to my list once the series is completed, whenever that is, a few years from now. If I don't like it, I will just consider it a DNF. Next we have Fence, which is a comic written by C.S. Bacat, and I believe there's also Joanna LaFuente and Joanna the Wild, is it? Joanna the Mad, not Joanna the Wild. And I am on book 4, I believe, and I do own this. I will obviously be reading this in January because it's super short and super quick. I have recently started to enjoy this a bit more. I was a little underwhelmed with the first 2 volumes. This is one of those series where I'm like, do I want to continue? Do I not want to continue? I really struggle with comics that are not completed because, like I mentioned, I don't like when I don't know when a series is going to end. Like, how many volumes are there going to be? How many volumes are going to come out each year and all that stuff. So we'll see. For now, I will read this one and then maybe I will have a better idea if I want to continue with this or not. Next, we have A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, which is the Wayfarer series by Becky Chambers. I read the first 2 books this year. I actually started book 3 and temporarily DNF'd it. I just was in a bit of an audiobook slump, and then I was in a bit of a sci-fi slump, and I also was not enjoying it nearly as much as the first 2 books, but I would of course like to continue with this series. This book I think usually has quite a bit of a hold on it, so I should probably go ahead and put my hold on it like as soon as I finish filming this video, because I think last time I had like a 10-week wait for it. It would be nice if I could go ahead and finish up the last 2 books of this series. Next we have Spoiler Alert by Olivia Dade, I believe, and I absolutely loved the first 2 books in this series. I think the third one is called Shipwrecked, and it is the 3rd and final book in the series as far as I know, so I would love to go ahead and complete this one. I think it would be a relatively high priority for me, 1, because I've enjoyed all the books so far in the series, and 2, because it will complete a series with me reading just 1 book. So I would say there is a very, very good chance of me reading that in January. These are just contemporary romances. I believe all the characters are plus size, and there is usually some other sort of disability representation. I believe so far we've had dyslexia and ADHD represented in these stories. Next, there's A Well That Was Unexpected. I believe this was by Jessie Santanto, who wrote Dial A for Aunties. This is a YA series. The second book is not out yet. I don't know when it is coming out. I have to admit I haven't looked into it, but I did have fun with the first book, so I am definitely going to continue that series. Obviously not yet because I'm caught up on it. Next we have Blood Debts, and I can't remember the name of this author unfortunately, but the second book is coming out sometime this year. I have it in my most anticipated releases post that I did on Instagram. If you want to check that out, my Instagram is always linked down below. When I picked this up, I kind of picked it up spontaneously, and I did not know it was part of a series, and when it ended I was like, oh darn, now I have to wait. But it was a really good book, so I highly suggest checking it out. Next we have The Singing Hills Cycle by Nevo, and I've read the first 2 books in this series, and I would like to read the third one, which I believe is called, is it Down in the Riverlands? Something about the Riverlands. And these are really short, so they're super great for reading during a readathon. I've been enjoying them, but they are a little short for my taste personally, but I find them to be a very relaxing experience. If you're someone who's really into storytelling, I think that these are going to be something that you would enjoy. Up next, we have a series I should have finished this year. It was one of my reread goals to read the first series of Warrior books, which is the first 6 books. I believe there's multiple series within this world, but I'm just interested in reading this first one, and I've been having a great time with it, but unfortunately I just didn't have time in the last couple months to really fit in as many as I wanted to. So I do still have the last 2 books of this series, A Dangerous Path and The Darkest Hour, and I am hoping to finish this up in January, since it technically should have been done already, but here we are. This is a middle grade series. If you don't know it, oh my gosh, these are my childhood. We are just following cats, so if you like cats, then you definitely should maybe check this out, because sometimes they get hurt and die, so maybe you should check it out. But I have fun with it. Next, we have the Perfect World series, which is a manga by Ria Ruga, and I actually have the next 3 books, which is 8, 9, and 10 here with me. I have not been enjoying this series really recently, but I am going to persevere and finish it up, okay? Because it doesn't take me that long to read them, and there's only 12, and I'm so close to the end, and I would love to get through 3 of them here in January, just because they are quick reads, and I just haven't been prioritizing them here towards the end of the year. But all the same, this does have disability representation in it, so that has been really well done. It's just the romance aspect of the story hasn't really been present, so I'm like, I thought this was a romance, so what's going on here? But hopefully our characters finally get together again, and the story will get better from there. Next, we have the Bergman brothers. I don't remember the name of this author or even the name of the next book in the series, but like I said, it'll be present at the end of this video on my little screen. And I have only read the first book in this series. I felt like I was kind of underwhelmed by it. It wasn't like amazing, and so I haven't prioritized the other books in this series, but I do think that each book has some form of disability in it, so I definitely want to continue it, and hopefully I enjoy it more and more as the author gets a little bit more comfortable writing this series and all that jazz. There's a lot of books in this series. So we're gonna try and make some progress in this book. Next, we have the Monsters series by Lily Mayne, which I will definitely be continuing. The first book is Soul Eater, but I am on book 4, which is Gloam, and this is a monster romance series that is set in post-apocalyptic America. So I've read the first 3 books as well as a novella in this series so far, and I would love it if I finished this series. I have been pretty consistent in reading one of these per month, so I would say that I have a very high chance of finishing the series this year. Next, we have the Priest series by Sierra Simone. This is the last physical book that I own off of any of the series continuations. The next one is Sinner. I actually didn't read Priest and so far don't have interest in reading Priest, but I did read Saint, which is technically the 3rd book in the series, and Sinner is technically the 2nd book. But I really love Sierra Simone's writing and her depictions of depression, so I wanted to go ahead and read another book in this series. This one, I believe, follows a woman who wants to become a nun, but she wants to experience, I don't know, sexual pleasure before she does that. I don't know why she would want to experience something just to know she can never have it again, but to each their own, and I'm very excited to read it. As far as the other 2 books, like I said, I'm not including Priest in this because I'm not at this time interested in reading it. Who knows, I may change my mind, but for now it's just not calling to me. But the author, I believe, did mention that she is going to make a book possibly for the 3rd brother, because so far each of these books has followed one of 4 brothers, and so she's planning on writing another one for the youngest. And then there's also this Priest character, which I know you're like, you don't want to read Priest, but you're okay with this Priest. Yes. I don't know what else to say. There was a Priest character that popped up in Saints, and apparently he pops up in the other books and is very much kind of the person who shows up at the right time saying the right thing, someone who can offer a lot of spiritual guidance to people who need it at their lowest point. And I believe she's planning on writing his romance as well, and I was just really intrigued by him as a concept, as a character. So if she writes a story for him, I will definitely read that. Like I said, I'm thawing a little bit to the idea of reading Priest, but for some reason that concept just takes it a little bit too far, just based off what I heard from it. So I'm not religious or anything, but still, it is what it is. And then Regency Fairy Tales, the first one is Half a Soul, and I can't remember the name of the author, so I read Half a Soul and then The Lord Sorcier, which was just a little novella that was at the back of that book. And I think the next one is called 1,000 Stitches. These ones I don't really plan on reading physically because I thought the book was like decent. I thought it was a pretty good time, and I do want to continue with the series, but I feel like I've heard not as much about these, so I don't feel like purchasing them like I did Half a Soul. I'm gonna go ahead and get them through my Libby app, and I do feel like it would be a good one for this readathon, especially since it's kind of fairy tale based and we are still in winter, so it's a vibe. Next, we have Criminal Tensions. This is by Cole McCade. I mentioned earlier that I was starting another one of his series. Now, I did get KU here in the month of December, and it will be going a little bit into January, maybe by like a week or so, and I would really love to crank out another 2 books in this series by the time my KU runs out. I have really been enjoying this series. It's kind of a mystery of the week series where we also follow 2 detectives who are, I believe, very slowly going to fall in love. So having a fun time with that. Would really like to read the next 2 books in that series. Next, we have A Curious Beginning, which is by Diana Raybourn. I own the first 2 books, and I've been kind of going back and forth with myself if I would like to continue purchasing these books. It's just the series is really long, and while I really enjoy the characters, the mystery part of it is not doing much for me. So I'm like, once I finish a series, I don't think I'll ever reread it. So for me to buy all of these books for nothing, I may see if I can get them cheap somewhere. I think I had to buy the second one full price, but I might look around like Pango or Half Price Books or Outlet Books, but otherwise I may get them from the library. That being said, because I haven't decided yet how I'm going to get the 3rd book, I'm not planning on reading it in January. Next, we have The Mead Mishaps. I don't remember the name of this author, but I believe the first one is called something like That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon, and I think the second one is That Time I Got Drunk and yeeted a love potion at a werewolf or something along those lines. So these are just little fun, I would consider semi-cozy fantasy romances, and it would be really great if I could read another one of those and then maybe even finish the series this year, since there's only 3 books. Next, we have Silver Under Nightfall by Rin Chapeko. Obviously, that next book is coming out sometime in 2024. Once again, that one is in my most anticipated releases post on Instagram, so you can check that out. But obviously, I'm not going to be working on that because it's not out yet. Same with A Dowry of Blood. That next book I think is not coming out until later in 2024, so we will not be working on that, and that's by S.T. Gibson. Had a really great time with that. I know that this is more a companion novel. I don't think it follows the same characters, but it's called A Dowry of Blood 2, or at least that's what it says in parentheses under the actual title. All right, and we are down to the last 2 series, which is good because I am losing my voice very quickly. So I actually haven't even marked this one as completed. I have it on full screen, so once I am done here, I will go ahead and click that off. But Love Light Farms, even though I just finished it yesterday, I don't remember the name of the author. I didn't love this book. It was a 3.5. I think it definitely had some flaws in it, but I had a good enough time with it where I was like, you know what, I will continue with the series. We'll see what I think about book 2. And if I don't love it, then we can just DNF the series. And then we have Christmas Daddies. This is by Faye Quinn. This is an author I have a few books I want to read from. So I did read the first one, which was called Let Your Hearts Be Light. I gave this 4 stars. I had a relatively decent time with it. So I think there's only one other one out there, but I do believe that he self-publishes, and oftentimes with self-published books, Goodreads isn't as good about updating when there's a continuation of the series until, I don't know if the author has to do something or what, but for now there are at least 2. This is a book that I'm not planning on continuing here in January. The same goes with the Love Light series since I just finished them. I'm assuming that I will probably read the next book in like a December of next year. All right, guys, so as promised, here are all of the books that I'm hopefully going to get to. There are 21 of them. Obviously, I'm not going to get to all of them. I don't think I have ever, actually, I know I've never read 21 books in 1 month. As I may have mentioned, this readathon is going a little bit into February, so you may see some of these on my February TBR if I'm not able to get to them. Unfortunately, I don't think I will be vlogging in January just because I will be working on a lot of my what is considered end of year material. I save all of that for January until the last book is read in December. So I will be going over my surprises, my disappointments, my worst, my best, as well as my stats. So hopefully you stick around to check out all of that. I will of course also be doing my mid-month wrap up, so you can check in to see how I'm doing on this ridiculous amount of books that I am eyeballing at this moment. All right, guys. Well, I would love to know how many series you are going into 2024 with, and how many did you finish this year? As always, thank you so much for supporting my channel by watching my videos, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!